my dears, how are you doing? I have not written or filmed a video in over a month and a half, and this feels weird and wrong, and I have taken like 6 takes to even get this far because I forgot how to do it. So anyway, my break was lovely. I have missed you. I have missed being slightly forced to constantly be learning and growing and teaching. It made my brain feel foggy and like I was just missing something. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're going to talk about tips and tricks for traveling, and not just disability related tips and tricks. I've traveled a lot in my life, and I've gotten pretty good at it. So I've made this to include more general tips and tricks as well. Though I do guess that all of my tips and tricks are about traveling as a disabled person, because I have always been a disabled person. But anyway, so topic of the video. We're going to talk about travel. I intended for this to be an organized list. Like I was going to do categories so it was clear you could pick different things. And then I tried to separate them, and they all interconnected so much it became a blob. So we're gonna vibe with the blob, and that's gonna be okay. Blobs are great. I'm doing it generally in the order of like how you would plan a trip or how you would experience a trip. Yeah, I don't like listy videos, but that's how this ended up, and we're rolling with it. So, but the first thing that we need to go over before we can talk about the actual like traveling tips, we need to talk about how you plan the trip, because I personally am pretty okay with anxiety when I'm on the trip. There's a plan to follow. I follow the plan. Making the actual plan is the worst part. Like, it's the most stressful thing, which is why I have done a great job of offloading that onto other people for the vast majority of my trips thus far, but that's not always a possibility, unfortunately. So here is my like least stressful way of planning for trips, I guess. Now, the first thing that I do is I make a list of all the things I want to do or see in a place that I'm going to, and the general time frame that I know that I'm going to be there or want to be there. I'm not quite sure how somebody would choose specifically what places they're going, because all of the trips that I've had to plan have been very designated work trips to specific places, so I can't be a whole ton of help on that one. But I will say that if you're somebody with mobility issues or who uses mobility aids, I highly recommend traveling to cities where the Paralympics have taken place, because typically the Paralympics make people realize how inaccessible their city actually is, and they will do something about it. Accessibility within the suburbs of that city or anywhere else in the country, pretty rare, but at least in that specific city, you're going to have a much easier time than you will elsewhere. If you don't know where the games have been in history, they've been going on every 4 years since the 1960s, since 1960 to be precise. There's a Wikipedia page for you, lists all the games locations from 1960 to 2032. But anyway, once you've made your list of things that you want to just generally see, figure out where on the map those things actually exist. I recommend printing a map of the place and putting little dots or stickers there so that you can visualize all of these things. And then you're going to find that things naturally are going to group themselves together, and it will more or less plan your itinerary for you, which is really wonderful. From there, you can figure out what things you definitely want to make time for and what things are an extra add-on if you like spontaneously have an hour free or something. I call that spontaneity with options. It is flexible to your needs, but it also has enough of a plan that you can easily make decisions. This is also a great time to research accessibility of those places, try to find food you can eat along the way. Again, maybe just make a list of a couple things that could work for you so that you have something to choose from, but you're not lost trying to find allergen-friendly food when you're already so starving that you are getting a migraine, because I've done that before. And then figure out if things that you want to do need tickets or reservations, and make sure you get those, because you are gonna want those so that you can actually do the things. Also, a little life hack, if the thing that you are going to be doing is in the United States and it is a national park, national preserve, or anything else that falls within the category of federal lands, a lot more things require tickets than you think. So look up that park on recreation.gov. You can find, usually tickets are like 90% of the time free, but you can reserve them ahead of time on there. Then you can save a lot of time with lines, and also a lot of places people go and then they find out they need tickets for it and it's too late to get them and it's really upsetting, and the park ranger's gonna annoyed with you for that. So you don't need to do that. You can just go on recreation.gov and think and plan ahead. And also, while we're speaking about national parks, if you go in person to a park and ask for an interagency access pass, all you need is your license or passport and either a VA card, social security disability documentation, or a physician's note with a statement that must include the individual has a permanent disability, that it limits one or more aspects of their daily life, and the nature of those limitations. And then your pass is free and permanent, so you can get into any national park for free for the rest of your life, which is pretty darn cool. I will say that I have heard other people say that they didn't need that documentation. They just said, I'm disabled, and I, sign a legal thing. It's like, yes, I'm disabled. And then you can get your card for free. They also are not allowed to legally save those documents. So if you go to them and say, yes, I'm disabled, sign that federal paper, they're not going to save it for more than a week, and it's not going to go to anybody. So if you're concerned about, I don't know, the government having that information, they don't hold on to that. They're not legally allowed to. the more you know. I think it obviously does very much depend on where you go to get your pass, what ranger's working fees that day, and also the conventional visibility of your disability. And also if you happen to be the sibling of a ranger of that park, that's gonna help your case. But in general, having the paperwork is probably the safest bet. I've linked the Access Pass website for you in the description if you're interested. The card has a little owl on it. Where's my, hold up, I'm gonna go get mine. Oh! All right, so here's mine. There's nothing fancy on the front. Cool. This is mine. It has a little owl on the front. It's super cool. And it means that I can go into any national park at any point for free. So cheers to that. Thank you to the government for doing one thing for disability. Yeah, anyway, that was a tangent. So you've got your tickets, you got your reservations figured out, all that great. You also have your general spontaneity with options choices figured out, all of which super pretty rad. Also a tip for when you're booking things and comparing prices and starting to panic about how things are adding up, because that's part of the whole process. Reminder that traveling is supposed to be a fun thing. And if something is a very small bit more expensive, but it's going to minimize a large amount of anxiety, like 10 times over anxiety for you, that's worth the extra little bit of price. I know that it's easy to be like, well, this flight with a connecting flight is $100 cheaper than the direct flight, so I'll just get over my anxiety and save $100. That's not how anxiety works. You will spend the entire flight being panicky about, will I get in on time? Will we be in the right terminal? Will I have time to get food? What if we're delayed? What if the flight gets canceled? What if my luggage doesn't transfer in time? Etc, etc, etc. The level of exhaustion that anxiety brings is way more than you think, and it's not a good way to start off your adventure. So saving a little extra for that extra $100 is hands down worth it for saving your vacation, at least to me. I will often splurge a bit on tiny small things that'll make my life more accessible, and it's truly the best place to splurge because it sets everything up to be so much better and you actually enjoy your trip. And it's hard because it's easy to look at your wallet and be overwhelmed and see the visual difference it's gonna make, as opposed to like the physical difference that's harder to quantify, but like, just trust me on this one. Also, this is a great time to remind yourself that if you absolutely hate art museums, you're not gonna suddenly be interested in art museums when you go to Italy. If you hate hiking, even if it's beautiful Hawaii, I'm pretty sure that you're still probably gonna hate hiking. If you are allergic to a particular type of cuisine, you're not gonna suddenly be not allergic to that when you're on vacation. So plan your trips around that. You are the exact same human on vacation that you are at home, and it's hard to reconcile that and work with that and acknowledge it, but you really need to, and you should probably start your planning with that in mind. Now, when it comes to packing, do yourself a favor, pack that one medication that you only ever need 3 times a year. Throw in those medical aids you rarely use. Every time I travel, something somewhere randomly flares up for the first time in months, solely because my routine is different. And not having the medical supplies that you need to be able to make yourself comfortable and be able to enjoy your trip really sucks. I also recommend putting all of your emergency meds and medical stuff in your carry-on so that if luggage gets lost, you still have those things. And don't worry about bags and whatnot. You can check an extra bag or have an extra carry-on for free if it's entirely for medical supplies on many, if not most airlines. Super easy to call ahead to ask, or read your airline's accessibility policies on their website. A lot of them just have it written out there. Also, pro tip if you're traveling internationally, make sure all your meds are labeled in their original containers so they don't think that you're a drug dealer. I also highly recommend looking up what medications of yours are legal internationally, because those things do change country to country, and it might be wise to have a doctor's note with some of those meds while traveling, rather than just showing up in a country and potentially having issues. I have never directly had issues, I have nearly had issues, so plan ahead for that. Now, when it comes to literally packing things, there are some awesome packing lists online. Most of my lists are very weirdly personalized versions of those, so I recommend a quick little Google to see what you can find and then make a digitized version for yourself. I also usually will map out, like, these are the days I will be gone. This is the weather and the general temperature. This is the itinerary, and I'll put that all in a little thing, and then I will pick out my outfits based on that. Generally plan when I'm gonna shower, those kinds of things, so I can know what to expect and have some semblance of routine. And then I can bring that little map with me when I travel. Sometimes I will just like glue it into my journal, and then I know what I'm wearing when, or what outfits I can switch around to mix and match and that kind of stuff. And if you want to fit more things into your suitcase, put your socks and underwear into your shoes and roll all of your clothes. You're welcome. I also highly recommend packing a comfort thing. You will rarely find me traveling without a stuffed animal and a small fuzzy blanket. Those things keep me grounded, and I will always make space in the suitcase for them. Sure, maybe it's frivolous, wait, that could be better spent elsewhere, but for me, it is a necessary safeguard, and I have used them and been happy about using them every single time that I have packed them. So if you have anything like that, don't be afraid to make a little space to try to bring those things with you. Now let's talk about airports, which are truly the worst places on the planet, but here we are. We're gonna start with TSA, the worst part of of the worst part. As a transgender, non-conforming, and visibly disabled person who wears a metal back brace, TSA is my worst nightmare. Half the time I have gone through with a brace and I will just be like, hey, have a back brace, has 26 vertical metal bones holding my spine together, so I'm gonna set this thing off. And I've gotten a quick pat down and then I've been on my way. The other half of the time I have been strip searched because they think it's a bulletproof vest or something. I don't know. As a survivor of things and stuff, that really does ruin a day. So at this point I have weighed the pros and cons and I have elected that a minor medical emergency is preferred to being searched or patted down by a TSA agent, which is a very messed up and flawed conclusion to draw and really shows the issues with our system. But anyway, my system is I put the folded brace at the top of my carry-on. I go through security while feeling wildly dysphoric because my brace also acts as a binder, but whatever. And then afterwards, once I get through security, I will go to the bathroom and put on my brace. It sucks, but it has worked for me better than the previous method did. Just sharing that in case anybody else has that experience. That being said, there is a program called the TSA Cares program. In that program, you get the same perks as TSA PreCheck, except it's free, and also they assign an agent to you who will walk you through the whole process. I did this when I was flying to Italy to study abroad. I had a panic attack in the airport, as one does, and my mom requested a TSA Cares agent ahead of time, and they were like, yeah, of course, and they sent a guy over, and he took my backpack, he brought me to the front of the line, and he talked me through the whole thing. Truly a life changer, and I think going forward, if I did that with my back brace on, it wouldn't really be an issue, but generally in larger airports, they do see more people every day, so they're more chill about weird medical supplies than tiny regional airports. But if you want to partake in TSA Cares, it exists for children traveling alone, disabled people who need extra assistance, elderly people, and generally anybody else who just gets overwhelmed easily and needs support through TSA. They don't ask questions because they assume that if you know about this program, you need it because it's not advertised anywhere at all, which is an interesting way of gatekeeping, but sure. But you can call ahead and let them know that you're gonna need somebody. Usually by the time you get there, they forget to have somebody ready for you. You can easily ask for one at the checkpoint before you get in line and they will easily make that happen for you. It's super simple and I cannot recommend it enough. It's an absolute life changer. Also, another level of protection, for me at least, is people working in airports are slowly going through trainings about the sunflower lanyard thing. It's more prominent in Europe, but it is picking up in the US. Basically, this green lanyard with sunflowers on it, mine's not within reach. It signals that you have an invisible disability and may need extra time or care or help or anything else. I usually wear mine from the time I walk into the airport to the time I get settled on the plane because it makes me feel safer about openly stimming without somebody seeing me as a threat. And it also means that people who work there are usually more patient with me if they are aware of the whole situation of the lanyards. Not all airports, not all people working at airports are gonna know what that means, but a lot of them do. So I have linked their website for you in the description. I also linked the site for the TSA Cares, and there's a TSA website that goes over all the supports they have available. You should definitely check that out, especially if you have mobility issues. I don't know a lot about the logistics of that, so I'm not really covering it in this video because I tried to research it and I just don't know enough about it in order to give you an example, unfortunately. But I left all of that in the description for you if you need it. Also, this is an option for a lot of people, but if you do get overwhelmed easily in airports, many big airports do have sensory spaces. It's usually one per terminal. You can Google them, you can figure out if there's one that'll be near you that you can hang out in if you need. You can also ask somebody and I bet they'll show it to you, but Google is helpful and asking for things is scary. In general, my general like advice for all of this is, especially with airport traveling, but also any other kind of traveling, knowing generally what to expect goes a long way. And rather than explain to you what that looks like for me, I'm just gonna give you an example of what my thought process would be like in the car on the way to the airport and how I prep myself for the airport. So normally like I'm in the car, I'm on the way and I'm gonna say, okay, so I'm going to Terminal 5 and I'm flying United, I don't know. And so I'm gonna go up to the check-in area where I'm gonna answer the questions on that little machine, and then I'm gonna put the tag that it spits out onto my suitcase. It's gonna go on the cloth handle, not the retractable one, made that mistake before. Then I'm gonna get in line, I'm gonna go up to the desk, I'm gonna give them my boarding pass that the thing printed out for me and my ID. They're gonna take my bag. Then I'm gonna walk to security where I'm gonna ask the person managing the line for a TSA Cares agent. Then I will wait until they come, they will check in my ID and my boarding pass again, and then I take off my shoes and my belt and my sweater and I take out my laptop and I put all those things in a bin. Also my backpack goes in a bin and also my carry-on goes in a bin. And then I go through the machine. I'm probably gonna get a little bit of a pat down on the other side and that's gonna suck, but I know that it's coming, so it's gonna be okay. And then the TSA Cares person is gonna help me get all my things back, and then I can sit on the bench on the other side and I can put myself back together. Then we're gonna go to that big sign, we're gonna check for the gate number, which will also be in my boarding pass, but it's good to double check both things. That's on the big electric board that's usually to the right of where I'm sitting. I'm gonna go to my gate, figure out where home base is, and I know that Terminal 5 has a Jamba Juice in it where I can get a smoothie and a waffle for breakfast. But first, I'm gonna go check in with the people running the desk at my gate, and I'm gonna say, hi, I'm disabled, I qualify for pre-boarding. They legally can't deny me that, so they're gonna go, great, sounds good. And then I'm gonna get my breakfast, and then we're gonna board, and I'm gonna go during pre-boarding, settle in my seat, and then I'm good for the flight. Boom, talk myself through the whole thing so I knew what to expect going into it. So it's a lot less scary because it feels less like I have to do all these things and more like a checklist. And then I can follow that checklist and then I get to the end. Also, I was gonna explain the pre-boarding thing on its own, but it fit in there nicely. Regardless of disability, according to the Air Carrier Access Act, they are legally required to let any disabled person pre-board the plane and aren't allowed to ask for any form of documentation. Highly recommend. It means you're on the plane longer, sure, but it also means that you can find your seat in your own time, and it takes away a lot of unnecessary stress of like, everybody's waiting for me and I can't find things and whatever. And while we're talking about the ACAA, let's talk about what other rights you have on planes. Please note that the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, does not apply on airplanes, hence why caption safety videos are a very recent update in the last 2 to 3 years, and a lot of planes don't have options for captioning in their in-flight entertainment, which is great. And the wheelchair situation is a disaster, but that is a discussion for another day. But basically your ADA rights don't technically apply up in the sky, which sucks. They do apply in the airport, however, so feel free to still request your rights there, but they do not apply in the air or on the plane when you're on the tarmac. But we have the Air Carrier Access Act, which it does something. It doesn't do a lot, but it does something. I will say that Senator Baldwin of Wisconsin has introduced proposed updates to the ACAA in March of 2021, and supposedly those might be moving forwards on some level, so all hope is not lost. Things could change sooner rather than later. That would be super awesome, but let's go over some ACAA basics for a moment. Now, under this legislation, all domestic and international flights with the US as its destination or origination are required to provide certain accommodations free of charge to people with disabilities in a way consistent with providing safe travel for all passengers. So this prevents airlines from discriminating against anybody on the basis of their disability. However, discrimination based on disability is allowed when necessary to comply with the safety requirements of foreign governments or the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA. An example of that being that if you're a disabled person sitting in an exit row and you don't think that you'd be able to physically open the emergency exit in the case of an emergency, they are allowed to request that you move to a different seat, but they also need to help you find that seat. They can't just kick you off the plane. Under this legislation, you are not required to inform the airline beforehand that you are traveling as a disabled person, even if you have a service animal or wheelchair. The only times that you should legally notify them is if you are traveling by stretcher, traveling with an electronic wheelchair or other device with special batteries, or requiring a hookup to the airline's oxygen system during the flight. That being said, I am not against calling the airline in advance to tell them what's up and state your needs so the crew can know ahead of time. They are not legally allowed to deny your being on the flights, and they can't ask your specific disability either. The only things they can ask are regarding how they can best accommodate you and help you through things like boarding, deplaning, walking through the airport, etc. So calling ahead of time just saves you a bit of hassle of trying to explain all of this in the airport. I also forgot to put this in my script, but if you are in a strict allergen diet, a lot of airlines have a special FODMAP friendly meal. They also usually have vegetarian ones. You need to call at least 72 hours before your flight to let them know your seat number and that you're going to need a special meal, and they will deliver that to you. You can also sometimes book that when you're booking your ticket. I cannot recommend this enough because it's super easy to ask for, and having allergic reactions on planes sucks. And it's a bad way to start a vacation. So do yourself a favor and don't do that. I've done it. I've done it a couple times now. I don't recommend it. Anyway, other things under the ACAA, if you have particular needs based on your disability, they are legally required to give you an individual safety briefing specific to what your needs are, because obviously, trying to remove yourself from a plane in an emergency is going to look really different if you can't stand on your own or if you cannot hear the instructions. Which leads us right to the next topic of carers, also known as accompanied travelers. This, much like the free medical bag thing and the allergen-friendly meal thing, is very airline specific. I've included a link in the description that goes into each airline specifically, but it's also very easy to find on an airline's website if you already know who you're going to be flying with. Some airlines will provide free or discounted tickets for carers to fly with you, and if you don't know a whole lot about the care industry or situation, I keep meaning to make a video about that and then I forget / don't get interested in it. I will at some point. Literally anybody can count as your carer if they are your traveling companion. That is, there isn't a specified, this is how you get accredited as a carer and therefore can get in places as a free carer situation. Most carers in real life are the parents, kids, siblings, partners, spouses, and best friends of disabled people. So Anything that's specifying a carer or a personal attendant or an accompanied traveler can be one of these designated people in your life. If you are disabled and you are flying with another person who supports your needs, or vice versa, you are good to go and you can legally call them your carer. Again, free or discounted tickets are not offered by all airlines, but they are by many, and that is something to look into. And some airlines actually require people with certain disabilities for safety to fly with a carer of some sort. They are only legally allowed to require this if the airline determines that the person is unable to comprehend or respond appropriately to safety instructions, has a mobility impairment so severe that the person is unable to assist in his or her own evacuation from the aircraft, or has both severe hearing and severe vision impairments which prevent him or her from receiving instructions from in-flight personnel. In this case, if you are in that category of traveler and are flying alone, they may provide somebody from the airline to fly with you or ask another passenger to volunteer to be your short-term carer. However, the airline is not required to provide you with an attendant, even if they do determine that one is necessary for you to fly, which brings a lot of questions to me of like, okay, in that case, would you fly without one and everybody prays there's no emergency, or are they legally allowed to deny you travel at that point? Those are questions I don't have answers to, but I'm going to assume the situation is rare enough that it's on a case-by-case basis, so that's why there aren't any answers. So if you know the answer, let me know, but that's all I could find. And while we're talking about carers, I didn't know where else to put this, but if you have a disability that is signed off with a quick little doctor's note and you plan things a few months beforehand, your carer can also go into any of the Disney parks with you, free of charge. Disney also has options for allergens where they will assign you a specified chef who will go to any restaurant in any park that you go to, as long as you plan ahead, and make sure that they can make something that you can eat if signed off by a doctor. They also have sensory spaces where you can wait for your ride if you require them. Also, people who use those spaces get expedited seats on rides anyway, and there's a lot of really cool accommodations offered by the Disney parks that I would assume actually make them a pleasant time. Once pandemic stuff has settled down a little more and I have a career and friends, I very much intend to go back to the parks with this newfound knowledge, because I had a big meltdown there when I was little and I hated it, and I love Disney and I would love to try again with the proper supports in place, because like Disney parks, I've always wanted to enjoy them. You can also find every single ride in the parks explained in a manual in excruciating detail online as provided by the park, which is a great form of preparing yourself for what to expect. And this guide also breaks them down based on seizure warnings and spin warnings and all of those things, so it's pretty easy to vet which ones you can and cannot do. Many other non-Disney theme parks also have these descriptions available online on some level as well. They're usually free PDFs. You just gotta Google and you will find them. And we are down to the last few things about traveling, so we're gonna go through them super quick. While you're on the plane or in any other form of travel, I personally love using that time of, okay, I'm stuck here for this many hours, and no matter what I do during this time, it is going to be lost time. And I use that to get a godforsaken amount of work done. I read an entire textbook on my last flight, and it felt amazing, and I highly, highly recommend. If you need to wear sunscreen, I told you, these are random and unrelated. If you need to wear sunscreen, which spoiler alert, you definitely do, but the sensory of sunscreen is horrible. The sensory bad of sunscreen is actually more about the feeling of it on your hands than you think. Get those kid sunscreen sticks that are meant for easy application on toddlers' faces without getting it in their eyes. Cannot recommend it enough. I use it for my whole body. Absolute life changer. I wear sunscreen now. Wild. If you have any condition in which there's a chance you may become unconscious at any point in your travels, make sure that you have a basic medical info either on a bracelet or a medical tag or in your wallet, somewhere that's pretty easy to find on your person, just in case. You're not going to need to use it because you're going to be fine, but it's good to have that around just in case. You never know what's going to happen. When I was in Italy, I had mine on my person in both Italian and English all the time, and I never used it, but I did have it, and that made me feel a lot better. Also, I didn't put this in my script, but if you are going to a place that you don't speak the language and you're concerned about allergens, you can very easily Google, like, okay, these are what my allergen words are in that language, and you can write on a sheet of paper, like in their language, I have allergies, and then list them. I did that for Italy, and then I ended up memorizing them after like this second time, and it was fine. And I just said it because I can speak Italian, and I was so nervous about it, but I didn't need to be nervous about it. But if you're going to say somewhere else that you don't really know the language, you can literally just like Google Translate. That's something pretty simple that they're gonna understand, even if it's a little wonky. So that's another good safety thing for you. So that whenever you go to a restaurant, whenever you go to talk to somebody, whenever you have any sort of issue, you can easily just pull that out. It's in their language, they'll get it, and then you can figure out communication from there. And that's just, even if you don't think you're gonna use it, it's a good backup to have. Again, this is unrelated, but if you are going to a place with higher altitudes and you are somebody who is prone to panic attacks, your body is likely, not always, but it may respond to the air at higher altitudes by trying to convince you that you are dying, and you're gonna be angry that you're spending your time on a pretty mountain having an unexplainable panic attack. So now you know, plan for it, remind yourself, like, this is literally just the climate and I'm fine, and I'm gonna do some deep breathing and I'm going to be good going forwards. Breathe a little more slowly and you'll be all good. Just, if that comes up and that's happening, you can go, oh, this is what's going on. I'm not actually having a panic attack. Cool. And then you can train your body out of it. Also, if you're going to a place with a time difference, the second you board your plane, make sure to change your watch and or phone time and just start behaving like you're in that time zone. Go to bed at a reasonable hour for that time zone, eat meals normal time for that time zone, act like you've been in that time zone for forever. Your body will be so excited about the trip that you're basically going to accidentally gaslight yourself into thinking that there is nothing different. I'm typically adjusted time-wise to a new time zone within 24 to 36 hours of arrival, sometimes even less. On the way back, I will do the same thing. It usually takes a couple days longer just because the letdown of coming home from travel and whatnot, it's harder to adjust and you're exhausted anyway. But if you just like pretend that you're in the time zone from the beginning and you just vibe with it, your body's gonna kind of just go, okay, I guess this is the situation now, and it just handles it. I also recommend while making your itinerary that you front load your days. And what I mean by this is that I try to do more stuff in the morning than in the afternoon. This is not just a vacation advice, this is life advice. I do this in life as well, and I talk to people about this a lot. But basically, most humans kind of lose all their energy around 2:30 or 3 p.m. and they don't gain it back until later in the evening. I can't explain why or where I got that information from, but I heard it once and it is very true, and it's been true for every person I've talked to about it. Time passes differently between 8 a.m. and noon versus 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. So take advantage of that. No matter what time you wake up, you're gonna hit a lull around 2:45. So why not try to do lots of things beforehand to get more out of your day? And if you have a lazy morning and you don't get going on your explores until 11 or so, and you get tired around 3, you're not gonna have enough chance to see or experience as much as you want as if you started at say 8:30 or 9 in the morning, which is still pretty reasonable. If vacation is sleepy potato time for you, then do whatever the heck you want. But I like to travel for the exploration of it. I like to maximize my energy and my time the best that I can. And while I get the point of vacation is to break from a routine, having a general routine while you travel is gonna be really helpful to ground you while everything else around you is changing, and then you can cope with these new things that you're checking out. So, for example, you wake up and you go to bed and you have meals around the exact same time every single day. Everything else you're doing in that day is completely different, but at least you have these touchstones to make your body and your brain go, okay, this is a thing that I can settle on, and then we're gonna move forward and it's gonna be okay. Also, speaking of food, if you are a vegan or vegetarian, the app Happy Cow is super great for finding good restaurants, and if you are allergic to literally everything like me, well, I don't know of an app, but avoid fancy restaurants. They almost never list all of their ingredients for the sake of a fancy looking menu. I'm a big fan of going to chain restaurants, getting kids meals, and getting breakfast foods. Those are the most allergen friendly things that I can usually find when I'm traveling. Also, if anybody knows of any app that can be allergen specific for finding food, please drop that in the comments and I will love you forever because I need that. I will say that I use Happy Cow a lot because they have, it's like vegan, vegetarian, or like flexible but have vegetarian food. We use it a lot because my sibling is vegetarian. But often if you find one of those like really fancy wellness cafes, they will often have a lot of FODMAP friendly food there, just based on how veganism works. So that is sometimes flexible, sometimes helpful and functional for me, but it really depends. So that's just my advice on that. Food is my biggest struggle when I'm traveling, and it makes me feel like I'm in the way, and it's a whole situation. Anyway, almost done. Also, when you're packing, remind yourself that the place that you're going to has stores. If you have a specific brand name or comfort thing that you need, pack those. But if you're panicking about not having room for toiletries or snacks or something like that, again, the place you're going has stores where you can also buy things. So make use of that. And then last but definitely not least, in fact, most important of all, be honest about what you can and can't do, what you need, what you want, and don't be embarrassed about advocating for yourself, because the people who you are traveling with want to travel with you because they like you. You are not in the way, you are not a burden, and if you don't say anything because you feel like you're in the way, you're going to be miserable, and once everybody realizes that you didn't say anything, they will also be really sad that you didn't communicate this with them. It's your vacation, spend it how you want and how you need to, and don't be afraid to speak out because you also deserve to have a good time and feel good. If you need to spend a third of the day just sitting in your hotel room and skipping out on an activity because you're burnt out, there's no shame in doing that. Literally just do it, it's your vacation. Like, just do it. And I say that knowing that every time I'm like, I need to stay behind, and I feel terrible about it for the whole time. But then I get settled and I'm like, oh, I actually needed this time. So it's a hard balance to learn, but it's one to reflect upon and try to learn and try to work with as you go through your vacation. So in general, as much as I love traveling and exploring and vacationing, my body and brain always takes a hit. No matter where I go or what I do, I always have something go wonky that really aggressively reminds me that I'm disabled, and it sucks and it's annoying, and in my brain, my visions of vacation always include me without my disabled needs. And I think disabled people get caught in that trap a lot. But that's not reality. So set real expectations. Start picturing your dream vacation as an accessible vacation, and don't be afraid to advocate for that because you deserve that. So with that, let me know what travel tips you may have in the comments. I always love creating a little resource pool of sorts. And as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for learning. Thanks for welcoming me back. I'm excited to be back on YouTube. I say that. You've all been watching my videos regularly up until now. It's me being back. I've pre-filmed a bunch of stuff and I feel like I'm back and it feels really good. And I'm really happy about it. So yeah, also please subscribe if you want to. I'm almost at 2,000 subscribers, which is very exciting. Yeah, anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for learning. Remember, it's never too late to start over, and I look forward to seeing you, my dear, in the next one.